Hi, I'm Stephanie Grace. I'm a columnist and editorial director for The Advocate and the Times-Picayune, and I'd like to welcome you to our town hall on insurance, sponsored by AARP Louisiana. We're joined today by a man with a lot on his plate right now, Tim Temple. He is the newly elected insurance commissioner. He'll take office in a couple of weeks. And thank you so much for being here, Mr. Temple.
Good morning, Stephanie. I'm glad to be here today.
Terrific. Before, we have a lot of reader questions, not surprisingly, but before we get to that, we have a short video from our sponsor, AARP.
AARP Louisiana is honored to sponsor today's roundtable with the Advocate. I'm Andrew Mull, AARP Louisiana Director of Advocacy. AARP, a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization, has been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. Here in Louisiana, we know the rising cost of insurance has hit your pocketbook hard. That's why we're committed to connecting you with information and resources like today's roundtable. That's what we do at AARP Louisiana. To learn more and to get involved, visit aarp.org/LA. And we hope you enjoy today's discussion.
Thank you, Andrew. And let's get started. Mr. Temple, as I said, you're just a couple weeks from taking office, and given what's happening, I don't think you're going to get much of a honeymoon. People are really struggling under the cost of insuring their homes, as Andrew said, and they're looking to the state for answers. So I wanted to start by asking, what happens after you take office? Do you think there'll be a special session, and what will be on the agenda if there is?
Well, Stephanie, I certainly understand that everybody is facing, financial challenges and stresses as it relates to insurance. It is hitting our pocketbooks from pretty much every angle imaginable, whether it's your personal auto or your homeowners or your business. Flood insurance is certainly a big one. Healthcare, premiums continue to increase. So it's there's been a confluence of all of these financial stresses that I would argue that, Louisianans have never experienced, at least not in anyone's, recollection. So, January 8th, I am going to hit the ground running, as they like to say. I became commissioner-elect August 15th, and I have been engaged with conversations with stakeholders since then. And I'm going to say relentlessly, every day I'm having conversations so that we can come up with the solutions to the problems that we are facing in Louisiana. And, you're going to hear me say this a lot. It's availability, it's affordability, and it's accountability. As regards to a special session, I don't know anymore. Once the redistricting conversation came into play, I think that took a lot of air out of the sails, or wind out of the sails, if you will, with regards to a special session to address insurance. Because of a timing issue.
Right.
I've had conversations, with the leadership about that. And if one is called, I'm certainly going to push to get some legislation introduced.
Do you know what that legislation would be at this point?
We're constantly having conversations about that. We've got a couple of ideas, but it's going to be, I can tell you, it's going to be focused on trying to bring some premium relief to people immediately. Let's not be mistaken. I'm not suggesting that we mandate any type of premium changes. You cannot mandate premium relief. It's been tried in the past. Other states have tried to do it. And what happens is companies leave. If you tell them that they have to charge a certain price or lower their price, beyond what's actuarially responsible to them as a carrier, that they're just not going to do business. So, we're going to make sure that we focus on things that you've got consensus on, that we agree will give carriers the ability to come in and compete. We want the affordability, but you can't get the affordability until you have the availability. So that's what the focus is going to be on.
Okay, interesting. On that note, I just wanted to share a couple of questions we have from people who are really in a lot of distress over this. And, I understand I got one of these big bills too with a huge premium increase. I get it. I think a lot of us do. Miranda, one of our readers, asks, I would love to know what's going to be done to ensure that we aren't going to be priced out of our homes. When I bought my house a little over a year ago, my monthly mortgage payments fit my budget. But after my insurance renewed this year, things are tight, and I'm dreading what will happen next year. I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford to keep my home. And then another reader named Novi says, how are the average income households going to pay $7,000 premiums and $20,000 deductibles? and he worries that neighborhoods will decline if people can't afford to fix up their homes because of those deductibles. What do you say to them at this point?
Look, I hear the similar scenarios across South Louisiana, and I certainly look. I understand the pain that the families are facing. I mean, it is stressing budgets to the breaking point. And look, people, you've got to pay the bills, and if you don't pay one, then that you take money from one to pay something else, and so.
It's a spiral for people.
I understand the situation families are in. And again, that's what my focus is going to be on bringing that availability back to Louisiana. Like I said, I'm not waiting until January 8th to start to try and engage so that we can bring solutions as early as possible. But insurance is complex. I think most people understand that or beginning to understand that. But as you've heard me say before, consumers don't care about the complexities. They just want the affordability. And that's why, that's part of the charge of the office is, my job is to understand the complexities of it and work with the industry, work with the consumer protection groups, work with all those stakeholders to create some compromise that will make Louisiana attractive. And we've got to acknowledge, after Hurricanes Laura, Delta, Zeta, and Ida, 800,000 claims, $23 billion, in property loss right there. The industry was stressed. We had 12 companies go insolvent. It is a catastrophe. And unfortunately, and look, you're going to hear me, try and, I'm going to be, maybe brutally honest when I say it takes time for change. But I can assure you that if we change nothing, the way we do things, nothing else is going to change. And so, again, that's why we're focused on identifying the handful of things, and it may be more than a handful of items that we need to change so that companies want to come back to Louisiana.
Can I ask, you mentioned South Louisiana, and we have readers all the way up in Shreveport. We cover the whole state. And I'm wondering how much of this is a crisis only in South Louisiana versus the whole state?
It's impacting everybody across the state, north, south, east, and west. Certainly people in South Louisiana are feeling the financial pressures more than North Louisiana, but not to say that they aren't, being impacted in North Louisiana. But it gets back to that, just the fact that, look, Stephanie, I'll use a number that I'm reasonably sure is accurate because I hear it from carriers in the marketplace and agents. Prior to the hurricane, you had more than 24 companies that were actively writing homeowners insurance across Louisiana. After the hurricanes, there's 3 to 4 that are actively writing the independent insurance space. The national writers, they remain in the state, and we're appreciative of their support. But if the independent agent base, when you've only got 4 carriers that are writing, and up until I believe last month, Orleans, Jefferson, St. Tammany, there was only 1 carrier that was actively writing quotes outside of Louisiana citizens. But I say that to demonstrate that the same pressure is being felt in North Louisiana. There are a few more carriers supporting business in North Louisiana, but when that supply shrinks, the demand is still there, the supply shrinks, then the price goes up. And again, you're going to hear me continue to circle back to this. We've got to focus on availability.
Right. I have a question from Dewey from Marrero. That's actually a good factual question, I think. Is there a threshold to the amount that insurance companies can increase your annual premium? His premium went up 60%, $5,700 to $9,400 for the same coverage amounts, and he hasn't had any claims. So is there any limit on that?
Well, look, one of the things that the carriers take into account when they are pricing is the price of the home. It because of inflation, supply chain constraints and everything else, it does cost more to rebuild a damaged home today than it did a year ago and 2 years ago. So insurance companies, they have to increase, their rate on the actual physical risk there.
Right.
But as far as rate increases, a carrier has to submit that to the Department of Insurance for approval or denial.
And what are the criteria that the department considers?
As long as it's actuarially justified, not unduly discriminatory, and not, I want to say, it can't be, it has to be rate adequate. So it can't be too inexpensive, if you will. Those are the criteria that it has to meet. And, the law says if it meets that, then
Okay.
then the commissioner of insurance, can approve or deny.
So the law says that they can't charge too little, is what you're saying.
Correct.
That's why is that?
Well, you want rate adequacy. Like I said earlier,
Okay.
we had
Is that
12 companies
sustainability that to make sure they can pay their claims? Is that
Correct.
the idea? Okay.
Yeah, that's the correct. Now, look, it
Okay.
doesn't always work. We had 12 companies go insolvent after those hurricanes.
Right. So the idea is that, if you have too much competition, they could undercut, underprice.
Well, and you've heard me say before that, cheap insurance is expensive at the end of the day. It's the role of the commissioner to make sure that it's rate adequate. Okay. Cheap insurance that you pay your premium year after year or month after month, and when they go insolvent, then, you've actually harmed the consumer at the end of the day. They didn't get what they paid for.
Okay. He has one other question that I think, maybe other people have, and we can clear that up. If you have wind and hail coverage, does that mean you're covered for hurricanes?
Wind is hurricane coverage.
Wind is hurricane coverage. Yes. So wind, sometimes it's called named storm there's named storm, there's hurricane, there's wind and hail.
Well, there's deductibles as it relates to wind, and they can sometimes it's called a named storm deductible. Sometimes it's a wind deductible. There's different names, but it all relates to when the hurricanes come in and the high winds associated with it. And
that's wind and hail coverage, as opposed to flood insurance.
Flood insurance is absolutely something different.
And that's federal and
99% of it, and I say 99%. There are a few carriers that are starting to write private flood, but most of the flood coverage provided in Louisiana is through the National Flood Program, the NFIP.
Right. And if you have water damage, again, just to clarify this for people, if it's, the water rises, it's flood insurance. If the water gets in through a roof that's been destroyed, is that wind and hail coverage?
I'm the commissioner of insurance, and I certainly don't want to give people a false definition of what is covered and what isn't covered. I'll always say, ask your agent, call your agent, call your carrier if you're with a direct carrier, and get clarification on that. But generally speaking,
right.
when it comes from below, then that's flood, and when it comes from above, then that's not.
Okay, got it. And again, understood, you can't speak to anybody's specific situation. That's a blanket disclaimer here. Brian has a question that is about kind of whether it would be possible for local companies to start and fill the void we're seeing. He says property insurance continues to increase due to quite a number of factors. At the same time, property insurance companies have stopped writing insurance in Louisiana or gone out of business. Could the state do anything to incentivize or kind of encourage a local market to fill that void?
Well, the state, did create and fund the Louisiana Insurance Incentive Program. At the beginning of this year with initially $45 million. And the intent there was to bring new companies, to incentivize new companies to come to Louisiana.
That's existing companies from elsewhere to incentivize, as opposed to local companies, startups, basically.
It was told to incentivize new companies to come in. My understanding is the companies that took the money, that received those grants from the state, were companies currently doing business in Louisiana. So it didn't incentivize. I think it will eventually create some additional capacity for those companies to write more business in Louisiana that took that money, but it didn't incentivize any new companies. I shouldn't say any. I believe one new company, received money to write business in Louisiana. But Stephanie, and to Brian, and all the people listening to this today, we've got to acknowledge that right now our auto premiums, our homeowner premiums, they're the highest they've ever been. I don't think anybody can say that they remember a time in history when they were higher than what they are now. But if you look at that fact and then couple it to the point that we are not getting a slew of new companies that are wanting to come in and write business, and you would think, just putting on your economics hat, if you're selling a product for the highest price it's ever been, you would think more people would want to come in and start writing and selling that product too. That's not happening in Louisiana, which highlights the fact that we have some fundamental issues in Louisiana. We have excessive litigation. We have high frequency. In Louisiana also, and in the coast, our properties we're close to the Gulf of Mexico. The closer you are, the more susceptible you're going to be to high winds. And so, one of the programs that the department started this year, which I'm certainly in support of, I'm going to look at a different funding source, but I'm very supportive of the Fortified roofing program. We need to acknowledge we live close to the Gulf. We're going to be exposed to high winds. We need to mitigate that damage. And the Fortified roof program is a good first step toward that.
I was actually going to ask about that because we got a number of questions, and also we just did a story about it in the newspaper about the experience of Alabama, where they have managed to stabilize rates along the coast, even bring them down, and actually they offer a subsidy, they offer an incentive to taxpayers, but they've also had the experience that more people have gotten fortified roofs who haven't gotten the subsidy.
Yes.
So, I'd love your thoughts on that. And you mentioned the source of funding. Outgoing Commissioner Jim Donnellan has proposed spending $10 million that normally goes from the Department of Insurance to the general fund and putting that towards subsidies. Is that a good idea?
Well, first, just if I could real quick to touch on the success of Alabama,
yeah, please.
And I was glad to see that, Commissioner Donnellan adopted, what Alabama had done there successfully. And, I think that they probably even tweaked it and enhanced it somewhat to make it even better, which I'm glad that that's taking place. As you said, Alabama has somewhere between 44 and 48,000 fortified roofs in their state. They only have two counties over there that touch the coast. We've got 13 or so. So we've got a much broader area to deal with. However, of the 48,000 homes, 65 of them came through the grant program, people that received the grant money. The balance of those, obviously the large majority, those are individuals that chose to put a fortified roof on. And I would also say, as the building codes, they strengthen their building codes, people that built new construction or replaced existing roofs, put the fortified roof on. So it shows that you don't have to use the state dollars to fund all of it. The good thing, just like Alabama, Louisiana has a tax incentive program for people that choose to put a fortified roof on. You can go and get, I believe it's a $5,000. I don't know if it's a credit or a discount, toward your state taxes. I certainly, support that. But it's word of mouth. If you know that your next door neighbor has a fortified roof and they got a discount, and we need to know what those discounts are, and we can talk about that in a few minutes if you'd like. Yes. But if you know that your neighbor got a discount of whatever the number is, that will incentivize you to, if you're going to replace your roof, to get that fortified roof, because you want that too. And I think that's what you saw happen in Alabama, and I certainly anticipate it will happen here in Louisiana.
Right. They definitely are seeing discounts, lower rates for people who have those roofs. Is that something that the department regulates, or?
Yes. My understanding, Stephanie, is that the department has requested all homeowner writers to submit what their discount is going to be for a consumer that has the fortified roof program. I believe they're going to be coming out with something soon, within the next week or so. And not to put a timeline on anybody, because that's beyond my control right now. But I believe, I'm told that that's coming, that the department will let consumers know what they can anticipate. And again, I would just urge and remind people, you don't know what that discount's going to be until you actually get that fortified roof on and your carrier tells you what it's going to be. But it's certainly something I support. We need to fortify our coastal, property exposure. I mean, we're going to be subject to hurricanes for as long as Louisiana is where it is. And as long as we can't control the weather, which I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So we need to do what we can, which is mitigate our risk.
You mentioned building codes, and, I wonder if I know mandates are a dirty word, but is that a mandate? Is that something that you think is a good idea, or not something that government should do?
I don't see that as a mandate. I mean, building codes, they're constantly evolving. They're constantly changing. Louisiana updates their building codes every, year or 2 years, I believe, depending on what the national standards come out. So I think we need to be aware and look, it's common sense, and it's also the right thing. At the end of the day, if you can keep your roof on your home and if you can keep your contents dry, then you're going to get back in your property quicker and your claim's going to be less. That's good for the insurance company because the claim is lower, and it's good for the consumer because they get back in their home, and their contents aren't destroyed. And that's what we're aiming for. Let's make the smart choice and let's fortify, but let's also look at the building codes and increase them where they need to be.
And that's something that would happen at the state level, the local level. Do you know that, or?
It's certainly something that I'm going to look at as commissioner to get involved in that conversation to promote the building codes. Certainly in South Louisiana, we need to look at, the wind mitigation. Just like, you've got coastal parishes or coastal communities that elevate. You have to be above a certain. So I'm not advocating that you put fortified roofs in North Louisiana. Maybe there we need to look at, I would call it maybe, what's risk appropriate. If you're in North Louisiana, north of, draw, imaginary line, across the center of the state, north of Alexandria, maybe we need to look at roofs that are more hail resistant. We certainly have hail events in South Louisiana, but not as frequently. So I think that the codes need to reflect, what the risk and what the exposure is to the property. I don't believe that we should just do a uniform across the bat, require everybody to have, that doesn't make sense.
Right. And I mean, do you think it would only be new construction, or also if you get a new roof, if your roof needs to be replaced?
I think if you're going to replace an existing roof, it needs to be, again, if you're in South Louisiana, it should be a fortified roof, and the building codes can reflect that. But also, Stephanie, there is I believe that insurance companies are offering an endorsement for people that if they want to buy the endorsement, if they have a future, roof claim, that they could get, that portion of the roof, that would be fortified. And it may be that if you've got a total roof loss, then you could get the fortified. I'm not sure exactly how that works. But again, that's one of those things where you need to call, you need to talk to your agent and find out the details on that.
And I should tell people, if they don't know, you come out of the insurance industry, so you know that side of it well. It's actually, we had another question from Lydia. This is related, and she points out, something you've said, which is it's an individual decision to get one of these fortified roofs, and you could actually benefit from it individually in your policy premium. But, insurance is also about group risks. So does it kind of make sense to require fortified roofs because that will affect the kind of group rating in a community?
Well, I don't know that you can, again, you can do it through building codes. You can certainly ask people, you can certainly put in place building codes for higher risk areas. But I think maybe what she may be talking about is that there's a point when you get enough fortified roofs that you get kind of a common benefit. And that's one of the things that I've actually got a group looking at to see is what does that threshold in Louisiana look like? Once we get 10%, 20%, 50%, at what point is there a return, a benefit to all the properties in Louisiana?
That's okay. So that's something that's maybe encouraging. So to change tax a little bit, we also got a number of questions about Citizens, the insurer of last resort, which a lot of people are getting to know because that's the only option available to them right now. And by law, it charges higher premiums than those available on the private market, if there is a private market option, or even if there's not, I guess. Ellen from Mandeville said she purchased only wind and hail structure coverage from Citizens, and she was able to get separate insurance for other perils and for contents. Do a lot of people do that? And is that kind of a way for people to manage the finances? She said she was able to keep her rate at about the same as it was.
It's certainly, yes, that is an option that you can exercise through Citizens, just to buy your wind coverage, through Citizens. But I think where the issue that people are coming up against is in the, you said that was in Mandeville?
Mandeville, yes.
Mandeville, right? So, south, let's go further south of there. The coastal parishes there is no option, for the most part. I hear from people all the time talking about that availability issue. They have no other carriers that are willing to quote. So you have to buy your wind coverage and your other perils, your fire, your contents, everything through that. But in a competitive market, it certainly is an option that you can place your wind through that.
Right. I mean, before we leave Citizens, Commissioner Donnellan was very focused on getting people out of Citizens. Is that something that would be your focus? And also, do you think there's this requirement that the prices are higher than what's on the private market? Should that be waived if there is no private market option?
Well, look, Citizens, we certainly have an exposure, all of us collectively, to Citizens were we to have a catastrophic event and there not be enough reinsurance, and then there's an assessment beyond that. We saw that happen after Katrina. We certainly don't want that to happen. We wouldn't want to knowingly or willingly promote some type of program that would unnecessarily expose us to that. But at the same time, Citizens is the market of last resort. It's intended to be there, and if the current market conditions are 140,000 policies, unfortunately, in Citizens, then we need to make sure it's operating efficiently in the way that it should be. By law, it does have to be 10% over the parish. I believe it's got the parish average. And if there is nobody actively writing, then it has to be actuarially justified. I don't know how often they update those numbers and what that is, but I do hear, and it is concerning. When I travel the state, I hear people that say, I got a quote from another carrier. It was higher than Citizens. I'd like to stay in Citizens. That's not what Citizens is designed for.
Right,
and so,
right.
I certainly understand the pressures, the financial pressures of, the current, homeowners market on people. But, if we want Citizens to be this, and I've said a lot of time, it's supposed to be a safety net and not a hammock. You don't want it to be a comfortable place to go and you want to stay there. It's designed to be higher so that it encourages other companies to come in and write lower than what Citizens is. So if it's not working and if Citizens is lower, then something's broken there and we need to look into that. Okay. But at the same time, look, I get the financial pressure that people that are in Citizens. And that's why I want to encourage and, you're going to, again, I'll say it, encourage and promote a healthy, competitive marketplace in Louisiana that will encourage these companies to come back to Louisiana and start writing and offering coverage, premium that's lower than what they're currently getting.
And isn't that, in Florida, I don't think they have that 10%. And one of the problems with their Citizens was too many people. It was a better deal for people. So a lot of people were taking it. Is that right?
Florida Citizens actually competes against the standard markets. Right. And my understanding is it's actually the largest writer of property in the state of Florida. And then, when they had their Hurricane Ian, there was a fear that it was going to exceed, the finances, the surplus that they had. And had it done that, then they were going to have to go back and assess all their policyholders. I believe it got close. It didn't exceed it. But again, theirs competes with the market. Ours doesn't. I don't know if there's
not intentionally
around that. I certainly don't support and promote our Citizens being a competitive market. You've heard me say I believe in free market, and I want free market because I believe free market is truly the best way to get the right product at the right price for the consumer.
Is Citizens, is Citizens the largest in Louisiana right now, or is it close?
No, I believe Citizens is maybe the fifth or sixth largest writer by premium volume. And I think that's how they rank it, by premium volume. So it's the fifth or sixth largest right now.
Okay. And is that too much? Is that higher than you'd like it to be?
Well, look, if you're one of the 140,000 policies in Citizens, it's certainly too much because, just by law, having to be, the most expensive. And so, like I said, there is a need. And look, let's be frank. There are properties in Louisiana that probably are just not desirable by any insurance company.
Oh, sure.
And that's what Citizens is intended for, to be able to give the people that have absolutely no option anywhere else, a place to get some type of coverage. With all the companies that went insolvent, after Laura, Delta, Zeta, and Ida, we saw a bunch of policies go into Citizens. And as we had, 24 or so companies exit the state, those people had no place to go. So they ended up in Citizens. And we're going to, my focus is going to be, again, on that bringing competition back to the state of Louisiana. So those dozens of companies that left, they want to come back in. They want to offer a fair product at a fair price.
We have another question from Mandeville, actually. So hello, Mandeville, shout out. And this one I think is pretty specific to the area, but it makes sense when you think about it. Ellen from Mandeville says the vast majority of wind and hail claims in Tammany are due to trees that fall on roofs and the internal damage that comes after wind, water gets in and so forth. Instead of blanket cancellation of all policies south of I-12, could insurers be encouraged to write homeowners policies for properties that don't have tall trees within striking distance? Or could citizens offer something along those lines?
Yeah, that's certainly an underwriting guideline there that carriers would want to look at and see. And again, I can't get into the mind of a carrier, what they do want to write, what they do want to offer or not. That's certainly an intriguing idea. And look, again, that free market, if you create an opportunity for a company to come in and have an opportunity to offer a product at a price that people can afford and can buy, and they feel that they can make a fair profit, they'll do it. And that's what we want to do, is get back to that, and look, from a regulatory standpoint, from a legal standpoint, legislative standpoint, that's what we're looking at is, what do we need to change? What do we need to create? What do we need to perhaps do more of that we currently are to help give those companies, look, we're always trying to attract business in Louisiana, oil and gas, timber, film industry, you name it, Louisiana, we want companies to come here. Guess what? We want insurance companies to come here too and be able to offer products that consumers want. So, to that point, I'm going to look and see and do what I can to make sure that we're the state that insurance companies say, let's go and do business in Louisiana. Let's go do more business in Louisiana.
It's a little hard to imagine them saying that. That's a big selling job you've got.
We're working on it.
Okay. I think you'll like this question, actually. Louisiana's claims to litigation ratio are cited as a cause for high insurance rates. You've cited that. Would tort reform help address the situation?
Tort reform is, you've heard me say this before. I don't know what is tort. What does a tort reform look like, right? I think what Louisiana has, when we have excessive litigation, what drives that? Part of it is bad actors. We saw in Florida after Hurricane Ian, you had, using social media, they were, I call it, and I didn't come up with the term, I'm sure I read it somewhere, but claims harvesting. You've got groups out there trying to collect, large numbers of claimants and go and represent them. Look, I'll say this: insurance companies are in the business of paying claims. That's their business model. They take premium dollars in, and when you have a claim, they pay your claim. When you have inefficiencies, when the process is slowed down to getting money in the hands of the claimants, that's a problem. And then, the more people that are trying to get their hand in between the insurance company and the claimant, the slower the process and the more expensive the process is, right? So, insurance contracts tend to be complex. If you look at it, it's written by a bunch of attorneys, but it's sold by an insurance company to a consumer. So, we've got to look and see what can we do to maybe make that a little bit more simpler, easier to understand, so that the consumer doesn't feel like they have to have, a third party expert looking over their shoulder.
A lot of consumers have very frustrating experiences trying to navigate that. So you can't really blame them for seeking legal help, right?
And I don't. Look, like I said, during a 12-month and 2-day period, 4 hurricanes, 800,000 claims. It stressed the claims process to where, you could argue that it broke. They couldn't physically get out and adjust all the claims they needed to within the time period that the law prescribes. So that's one thing that we're going to look at. Is there a way that we can allow, insurance carriers a little bit more time? But the trade-off needs to be, if you give them more time, they need to make sure that they've got the right person on the ground that's able to get that claim resolved quicker. And that's what I'm talking about, the inefficiencies, we don't want to slow that process down. So, I think back to it, Louisiana is a little bit of an outlier. Texas and Florida have both adjust some of their legal environment over the last several years. I want to make sure that Louisiana is keeping current, if you will, with what's going on. We don't want to create this atmosphere of an adverse selection where claimants aren't going to be treated fairly, and then they feel that they need to get outside help. I've said it. Insurance companies are in the business to pay claims. We need to make sure that we make that as streamlined as possible, so that the consumer, the claimant, gets as much of the dollar that they're owed as fast as they can. And I'm going to support that. I am pro-consumer. I believe the best consumer protection any of us can have is choice. And the more choice we have, the better protected we are.
Are there specific laws that were passed in Texas, Florida, any place else that you think that's something we need to do here?
We're looking at that right now. Florida had one hurricane and they had 3 special sessions to address some of their, not just their legal environment, but they cleaned up some language in some other areas and some regulation. We're certainly looking at that to see what makes sense to do in Louisiana. Texas has done some similar, in years past. Look, we don't have to come up and invent anything all our own. The nice thing about the industry that we're in, there's 49 other states that are constantly, facing similar challenges. Maybe not hurricanes like we are, but certainly the Gulf Coast states are. But there's other states, they're always being faced with these challenges, and so we can look at those other states, see what makes sense, and let's adopt it. There's no reason to if somebody's already done it and it's proven to work, let's use that. Just like the Alabama Fortified roofing program.
Right.
They came up with it. They were successful. Commissioner Donilon and the good folks at the Department of Insurance grabbed hold of that. They implemented it, and it's up and running. We can do the same thing when it comes to some other reform, and I'm certainly looking at that.
Can I ask you? You mentioned Commissioner Donilon. We've mentioned him a few times. How's the transition going? You don't have all of the same idea. You're both Republicans, but you do have some philosophical differences.
Yeah, and we do. And look, I've had the fortune to sit down now with Commissioner Donilon 3 times to discuss the transition. We're actually sitting down again next week. And look, he's been very hospitable to me. He's welcomed me in. We've had some good conversations, and I think the transition is going to go smoothly over as I come in January 8th. And you're right. Look, we have a couple of disagreements and view things differently. But Commissioner Donilon's been there 18 years. He's brought some stability.
Been through a lot of hurricanes.
Stability to that department, and I applaud him for that. And look, like I've told him, I look forward to continuing the good things that he's done there. And he certainly has done some good things, and there's some other things that we disagree with, and we're going to change a little bit. But that's how elected offices go.
Do you want to touch on some of those things?
My regulatory view, I think, if anybody's been watching this, is that I see the department. My job, as I said before, is I work for the constituents of Louisiana. I work for the consumers of Louisiana, but I work with the industry. I got to make sure that I'm working with that industry to make you got to welcome them in. That doesn't mean that, that's at the expense of the consumer. And I know I've got a lot of folks that, against me that say that, that's anti-consumer by working with the industry.
You come out of the industry, they think, you're associated with it.
I come from it. Yeah. But guess what? Like I said, I am no expert. I'm not professing to be an expert on anything, but I do understand the complexities of it. And it's not just simple, pull one lever and you fix everything. And so, look, I'm excited. My regulatory view is going to be a little bit different. I want companies to feel welcome here. I want companies to come in. I'm going to hold them accountable. Like I said, we can't afford to have people pay their premium, their hard-earned dollars, to companies that go insolvent at the first sign of a bad, a hurricane. And I know, people will argue, 4 hurricanes in 12 months, was excessive, and it was. But at the end of the day, those companies took those dollars. They should have had the intent to have the financial resources, the reinsurance in place to sustain those types of losses and pay claims. And some of them, frankly, didn't have that in place.
Right.
And I will hold them accountable. But I want companies back into Louisiana. You as a consumer want more companies back in Louisiana. Right.
I mean, one of the things Donilon did support was, you mentioned before, the incentive program. Is that something you think is fruitful? You would support, continue, not continue?
I'm against the incentive program.
Okay.
You will not see me asking the legislature to appropriate your hard-earned tax dollars to give to for-profit companies. I don't think that's the right way to go. It doesn't address the fundamental issues that we have in Louisiana, with regards to some regulatory hurdles, with regards to some legal hurdles that we have in Louisiana. And I'll cite the example I gave earlier. We as consumers are paying some of the highest premiums, the highest insurance premiums we have historically for our home. And there's not, call the department and ask them if the door's being knocked down with companies just clamoring to get in and write policies in Louisiana. I don't think the answer is going to be yes. So that shows that we've got to, just handing out money is not going to help fix, the problems that we have. Certainly not long term, and as it's shown right now, not short term either.
Right. We're now a couple months into this incentive program. Have you seen the results, and what are you thinking?
Well, it started in March of this year, so we're more than a couple of months into. And I've said this: I don't think the expectation was set properly with the incentive program. We were told that, it would incentivize new companies. They would come in and start immediately writing new policies. And those, your viewers that, understand the insurance industry and especially the property industry know that if you're a new company or even an existing company in Louisiana and you start writing new policies, you're not going to write just a big, huge book of new policies into a hurricane season. And so if these companies were getting the money in April or May or June, well, that was the beginning of hurricane season 2023. And, you can't bet, you don't bet that you're not going to have a storm. You have to plan that you will have a storm if you want to survive. And, so I think the expectation that all these companies were going to come in and start writing policies immediately was not the correct one. And again, that's just the difference I have. I think what you will see now in the consumers and this will probably be a little bit of good news, those companies will probably we'll see start writing more policies now that we've entered, now that we're post hurricane season. They want to write as much premium as they can, not hurricane exposed versus hurricane exposed. So, I'm going to say.
So is now the time that people should be shopping because hurricane season's ended?
Well, look, you always want to shop your policy, right? Especially if you're in Citizens. I'm not going to say, just you hound your agent every single day, every week. Look, I'll tell you, and I talk to agents a lot. They understand the financial stress that their customers are under. Sure. They're under the same financial stress too, right? Those are the men and women. They live in the same communities, that people are. So they know that you don't have to just, call them to remind them. It's not like they forget. As markets become available or capacity becomes available, they'll market. They will let their customers know when they have an option on that. It doesn't mean that you just, forget about it. You certainly want to touch base with them time to time. But, independent insurance, whether it's independent insurance agents or the direct writers, that's the men and women that make it happen when it comes to trying to get that affordable insurance.
We actually had a question about insurance agents I wanted to ask you from Mary in New Orleans, who had a bad experience. She said she discovered that her agent kind of didn't provide inaccurate information for the quote on her elevation for flood insurance and some other issues involving her property insurance. What recourse does someone like that have? Is that something that the department regulates?
Yeah, my understanding, without knowing all the details on
not addressing her specific situation.
Right, but that sounds like something that they need to reach out to the department. Look, if agents are regulated by the Department of Insurance, right? So if there's a bad action on behalf of an agent, then the consumer needs to let the Department of Insurance know. And without going into detail, there are regulatory actions that the department can take, but also to look into and see, if anything can be done to help rectify that for Mary.
Okay, and that applies to flood insurance too, even though that's not regulated. Flood insurance is not regulated by the state.
If it's NFIP, it's certainly in the but
if it's sold by an agent in the state.
There are agents that place that coverage on behalf of NFIP. And they can certainly get involved and being, engaged in the conversation. But, that's one of those things where I would encourage, when issues like that happen, reach out to the department, let them know, what's not working, because I certainly want the department to be a resource, to consumers, to companies, to adjusters, to everybody. I mean, that's the role of the department, is to be a resource when somebody has a problem, no matter who that somebody is.
Right. We've mentioned this before. A dozen property companies went belly up these past couple of years. Most were regional companies that grew very quickly and had concentrated coastal risk. So there was really a mass failure. What can you do to make sure we do not have a mass failure like that again if we do end up getting more companies in?
Right. Well, of those 12 companies, Stephanie, I believe 6 were Louisiana domiciled companies.
Mm-hmm.
The balance of those were mostly Florida domiciled companies.
Right.
Yeah. And so, those companies certainly had maybe a bit of a double or perhaps triple whammy. They had Louisiana
Mm-hmm.
hurricanes, and they had Hurricane Ian, which just, compounding that. But look, at the end of the day, it's the Department of Insurance job to be the guard on that accountability, word that I keep using. You can't operate, and the company can't come and operate without the permission and the approval of the Department of Insurance. So it's the department's job to make sure that those companies have not just the policyholder surplus, the capital that they need to pay claims, day in, day out. But it's also the job of the department to make sure they have reinsurance, insurance on top of, behind them, so that when they have those catastrophic events, they have the financial resources to pay those. For 15 years, we had a number of, sometimes referred to as thinly capitalized companies that operated in Louisiana and sold that, cheap insurance that I said earlier.
Right.
I am not a proponent of cheap insurance, and I understand some people think that, oh, that sounds so good. I just want something that's cheap. I can
afford.
Right? I don't ever. Well, there's cheap and affordable, and I think everybody can agree there's a difference there. But look, at the end of the day, you're paying your hard-earned dollars toward insurance premium. It's my job as incoming commissioner, to make sure that company is there to pay the claim fairly. And yes, if you were those insureds for a company that went insolvent, your claim is covered by Liga, the Louisiana Insurance Guarantee Association. But that delays the process too, right? Because typically, you had the claim, it goes through the process. Eventually, your carrier goes insolvent. Now you're, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the road, and now you almost restart with Liga. That doesn't help the consumer get in their home. And so, my job is to make sure that companies that we allow to come in and operate and accept your premium have the business plan, have the finances, have the reinsurance in place to handle claims when you need it the most, right? I mean, a catastrophe, that's when you need that insurance to operate. Right. You need it the most. That's the job of the department.
I think there have been some increases in the kind of requirements for how much capital some of these companies have to have in recent years. Is that right? And do you think
there have been? Yes. And look, I was pleased to see the department support that initiative. I think it may have come out of the department to require insurance companies to have more, working, their policyholder surplus. It used to be, I believe, again, please don't quote me on this. I think it was $3 million initially. It's been stair-stepped up.
Right.
And over the next several years, it has to get to the minimum requirement will be, I think it's $10 million.
10, I think.
That certainly helps. But, like you said earlier, Stephanie, if you're going to have companies coming in and writing, policies, especially if you're going to be heavy in South Louisiana, $10 million doesn't sound like a lot of money to me.
No, it doesn't.
And so that's where I've got to make sure that companies that want to come in, write the business, they've got the surplus, they've got the reinsurance in place. And it's going to be a bit of a balancing act. You want companies to come in, you want to encourage it, but that's where that's the things that I'm going to focus on from that regulatory and legal legislative side to make sure that we kind of balance that out so that the companies have a fair opportunity, to make a fair profit. And look, you want your company to make a profit, because if you don't make a profit, you can't pay a claim.
Right. I'm glad you brought up Liga, because I had a question on that too. And that is, it's true. There are still people waiting to get claims through Liga from Hurricane Ida, which was 2 years ago. What can you do to speed that process up?
I will certainly engage with Liga once I become commissioner, and I've had an initial conversation, with the leadership over there. I think that they're working I don't know as efficiently as they can, but I'm certainly not in a position to criticize anything that they're doing right now.
Right. Are they under the Department of Insurance or separate?
They're the Liga. The commissioner has an appointment on the board.
Okay.
I believe has some input.
Okay.
On what takes place with Liga. But, I certainly want to support Liga, their initiatives. If there's things that we can do to make that efficiency, make it so that the claimant can get their funds quicker, get that claim resolved faster, I'm certainly going to support that. And I know the people at the Department of Insurance will as well.
Okay. We're coming up on our time here. And I appreciate this has been really informative. But before we go, we've got a number of questions on something that has nothing to do with homeowners insurance.
Sure.
And you can probably guess what it's about. Maybe you can't. I don't know. It's about the Blue Cross deal. Blue Cross, trying to sell out to Elevance, a national company. Mm-hmm. And, obviously there are a lot of people who are concerned about this. There's a lawsuit. It will eventually land on your desk. So, among the questions, what can citizens do to stop the sale if of a company that they think is in good financial condition and serving customers well? We don't want to lose Blue Cross just so we can create a foundation we know nothing about. So there's some skepticism. We're hearing a lot about that. What can you tell people about what is happening, what your role is, what you support?
Right. So, my understanding is, I think like yours, is that Blue Cross Blue Shield, they are going to refile, because the sale that was, I guess, it started sometime earlier this year in 2023.
And it was pulled under some
Blue Cross
skepticism.
Blue Shield voluntarily, they voluntarily, withdrew their application. My understanding is they will refile it. Right. And it came about. It was back in August, and I was actually in the hearing room. It was a joint insurance hearing. When they were being asked about the foundation, that seemed to be where most of the questions were coming from. How's the foundation going to operate? Who's going to sit on the foundation?
And the idea being, Blue Cross is a nonprofit. Does the money go to a foundation or does it go to shareholders? Basically?
Right. And look, that will be determined. The law is whatever the law says on that. But as far as the process, first, the 92,000 or roughly 92,000 policyholders have to vote on whether or not they want that to take place or not. Once it passes that threshold, then it will fall, to the department to evaluate the terms of the deal. Does it make sense? Is it, collectively good for the policyholders of the state of Louisiana? And there's a process that will play out. I certainly will respect and follow that process. Again, once I become commissioner January 8th, and obviously that's a lot more. There's a lot more formality, and I will be able to see everything that I need to with regards to that. But I would just for the people on the call, like I said, first and foremost, there's a vote that the policyholders have to come up. All the other issues around the foundation and the valuation, that's laid out and stipulated by law, and we'll certainly we will look at that and we'll follow the law.
One of the questions we got was, will policyholders be able to speak at the hearing?
Yes, my understanding is that that there will be the commissioner convenes a public hearing, and that at that time, and I believe, and again, please,
you're not in the office yet. We know.
Ignore my ignorance on this at this point, but there may be an opportunity for policyholders to speak at the Blue Cross Blue at the policyholder meeting. Yes, that's right. The policyholders will have an opportunity to speak at the policyholder meeting that Blue Cross Blue Shield convenes. And then the general public will have an opportunity to speak at the public hearing that the department holds once the policyholders have voted for. Okay. If they vote against it, obviously, then it's dead right there.
Right.
But if they vote for it, then the next step is the Department of Insurance will convene a public hearing, and public being public, then anyone will have an opportunity to express, whether they're for it or against it, concerns, whatever they want to say.
And the policyholders, does that include people who have like Blue Cross through their employer?
No, the policyholder is actually, my understanding is the name the person that actually holds the policy. So if you work for a company,
Mhm.
you're an insured, but you're not a policy holder.
Okay.
So if you work for Stephanie Grace Incorporated, you, Stephanie, would be the policy holder. But if you have 10 employees under, that get health care through your policy, they would not get a vote.
Okay. So those people should lobby their boss, I guess. They have something to say. Okay. We're about ready to wrap up, but do you have any last thoughts you want to share or message to our readers?
Yeah, look, I would just say this. Every day I'm talking to, the great men and women around this state, and I hear the concerns. I know that insurance is probably the biggest financial stress that everybody in our state is facing. Again, whether you're an individual or a family or a business, it is impacting everybody's life, everybody's pocketbooks. And I think it's overall, it's impacting our state economy. And that's why I'm going to be hyper focused on moving mountains, if you will, to make sure that we, the men and women at the Department of Insurance, and working with the legislators and with our new governor, and we haven't even touched on, the things that we're going to do there, working in conjunction with, fellow elected officials, to get Louisiana back in that posture where companies are wanting to actively come in and willingly do business, with you as a consumer. And I know a lot of people always say, well, as the commissioner, you just need to tell companies to lower their rates. I can assure you that does not work. In the long run, that hurts you and I, because more companies will leave this state. It is, America is still free market. Companies don't have to do business here. We need to make sure, and I am going to be focused on making sure that we're doing everything we can to make Louisiana an attractive state so that they can come in, offer you a fair product at a fair price. And again, when you get that competition back, you get to determine, which company you want to do business with and which company you want to send your dollars to. Okay. And then it's my job to make sure and hold them accountable that they pay your claim fairly and quickly when you have one.
Okay. Well, a lot of people are going to be watching. So thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your day. I know you're busy, and best of luck. I think everyone, we all want the same thing. We all want, people to be able to stay in their homes. So,
yeah, we certainly do. And best of luck to all of us. And that's the mission. We're going to work on that every day.
Okay. Well, thank you again. Tim Temple, Insurance Commissioner-elect. Hope we'll be talking when you are Insurance Commissioner. And thank you to everybody who submitted questions and everybody who watched. And thank you again to our sponsor, AARP. And happy holidays,
Thank you,
everybody.
and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yes.